Welcome, everyone, to the SoxProspects.com podcast, the web's number one source for information on the Boston Red Sox from top to bottom, from Fort Myers to Worcester, across the Pike to Fenway, and all stops in between. Thank you for listening. My name is Chris Hatfield. I'm the executive editor of Sox Prospects, and today we added to the 40-man roster our director of scouting, Ian Kundle. Ian, it is kind of unofficial baseball nerd off-season holiday day today. It is the Rule 5 draft roster protection day, which I dare say I find more interesting than the Rule 5 draft itself. I don't know what you think, but certainly the Red Sox have given us a fair amount to talk about this year. An eventful day, I would say. Maybe not eventful. Eventful would be like doing what the Rays did and making 3 trades, as well as adding a bunch of guys and DFAing others. But
yeah, I think Cleveland did that too.
Cleveland made a few trades as well. They traded Nolan Jones. I don't know if you saw that.
I saw that to Colorado.
Yeah, which is interesting. But that said, certainly a lot for us to digest. It was not just a boring, chalk 4 guys who we knew were all going to get added type deadline. There were some surprises in there. So we're going to discuss that. And there's plenty that's happened over the past week as well. So there's plenty for us to download. But yeah, it's only been a week, but we've certainly got enough to talk about for an episode. That is for sure.
Yeah, no, there's it's been a quiet, I think, start overall with actual news or with concrete transactions for the Red Sox especially, but also just I think MLB as a whole. Mm-hmm, but now that I think this first kind of decision point is out of the way, Friday obviously is the non-tender deadline, which is going to force some more action there. So I think hopefully it's going to start to heat up, but realistically it probably won't, and then it'll quiet down for Thanksgiving, and then it'll heat back up with the winter meetings, and then it'll be the winter break where nothing will happen for a month, and it will be in January and a bunch of free agents will still be unsigned.
We were talking about this in the Slack the other day about how you made the point of like the NBA first week of free agency, which is just
it's awesome, or the NFL
flurry
is the
of
same
activity.
Way. Yeah, and
I mean, just how do you make that happen?
I don't know.
MLB. I don't know how
I think the problem is that all the dates are so staggered. Like with NBA, like all these decisions have to be made before free agency opens. Whereas in MLB, they happen like, as we said, like today was the Rule 5 deadline, and then Friday is non-tender, and then the draft isn't like the winter meetings are like 2 weeks later. Like everything is like keeps pushing itself out instead of trying to have it all at once. So
I mean, what if you like started free agency on January 1 or something?
Yeah, but then nothing's gonna. But then the problem is with that is like
you lose the momentum.
Baseball shut. That's my thing. Is like the World Series just ended, and then now instead of going into what could be like another couple of weeks of like craziness, like just nothing's happened since then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like since the World Series, there've been 4 noteworthy signings. There's not been a single noteworthy trade that I can think of. Like there's been
all
trades,
the signings have been re-signings except for Tyler Anderson today.
Yeah, exactly. So because their big signings were Anderson, Anthony Rizzo, and then the 2 relievers who I wanted the Red Sox to sign. And
well, 3 relievers if you count Edwin.
But like nothing. Yeah, nothing. There's been no big trades. Like it's just it's moving around the deck chairs right now.
It is rearranging the deck chairs. But at any rate, well, if you enjoy us talking about rearranging the deck chairs, and you want to support the show, there's a few ways you can do that. First, you can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, whatever podcatcher you use. Help get the word out. We would appreciate that. And you can also support us on patreon.com/SoxProspects. Pledge a certain amount per episode and get some neat rewards. You can check us out at patreon.com/SoxProspects to see what the rewards are. And finally, of course, you can send your emails to podcast@SoxProspects.com. We want to talk about what you all want to hear about. We've got another great slew of emails for this episode, so we'll get to those at the end of the show. But Ian, looking at, I think we've continued to pause the season in review series because I think there's enough goings on over the past week, and maybe next week we can jump back into that with me. What might be a slower week, we'll see. One I need to talk about over the past week, and I guess let's just jump right into the big one of who the Red Sox protected from selection in the Rule 5 draft. And I guess the first name that we need to mention was not today, but last Thursday the 10th. The Red Sox selected Emmanuel Valdez to the 40-man roster, who was half of the return for Christian Vasquez from the Astros. Not terribly surprising. We said that was coming. Probably not a whole lot to add on that. unless you've got anything. And then today, the Red Sox selected Cedar Rafaela, Brandon Walter, Chris Murphy, all guys who we thought were going to get added. And they added two more guys, David Hamilton and Wilyer Abreu. Abreu, I don't think either of us were terribly surprised at.
He was on my 50-50 list.
Yeah.
Like it was basically three guys for different reasons. Him, Gonzalez, and Politi were my like 50-50.
Sure. We talked
like
about
you can
that
make a
last
case for
episode,
either
yeah.
way. Obviously the case is very different for each of them.
Sure.
But you can make a case like, yeah.
I get leaving, Wickelman exposed. I get leaving Politi exposed. We talked about that last time.
And like as I said, I wouldn't have done it with Wickelman. I wrote about it and talked about it on Twitter, but I get why they did. Like it's fine. Like we'll see what happens. I mean, it could work out, it could not.
It's a gamble that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a gamble that you get.
And yeah, and same thing with Abreu. Like I could see the case for leaving him unprotected. I could see the case for protecting him. Yeah.
Sure. The pivot point here is I think there's two takeaways that I had today. One is adding Hamilton, which caught me fairly off guard, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, I had him in my preview as kind of like a throwaway, one of the last people on the list, just because I was like, anyone on that list to me was, if you told me they were added, I would be like, okay. I wouldn't necessarily agree with it, but it was like they were in the realm of possibility. And that was mainly a combination of based on what I've seen from those players and also asking scouts from other teams like, hey, who from the Red Sox from this list do you think has a chance to be added? I'm like, sure, was his name brought up? Sure. But was it the first guy brought up? No. Was it the fifth guy brought up? No. Was it the 10th guy brought up? No. But like he was brought up at some point.
But it's the context of not protecting Thad Ward, which is the thing that makes it weird. And I'm getting I don't remember the year, but I'm getting the Red Sox protecting Alex Hassan while leaving exposed Josh Fields and Ryan Presley vibes from that decision. Not that I'm saying that Ward is going to become Ryan Presley, but just that, like, if you want to protect the guy, fine. But protecting him over the guy you left exposed seems a little weird to me.
Well, and I think
you want to start with Hamilton or Ward?
I'll just say I think they kind of go hand in hand, but just on like, it's just interesting a team that plucked Garrett Whitlock, who was coming off Tommy John surgery from the Yankees, and whose stuff that you didn't really know what it was. He had some stuff you liked before, but you're kind of gambling that maybe he comes back as good or better, and that's exactly what happened. Like we saw Ward for I think 50 or so innings between the AFL and the regular season. Like his stuff was down a little bit, which is understandable. That can happen after Tommy John. But like, there's still teams that like him. He's still got some good characteristics. And if you had to ask me which of those two players I think has a better major league career, I'd still go Thad Ward. And that's the part where I don't necessarily agree with. Like, I can see the case for protecting Hamilton. I don't think you can. I'm not sure, but if there's a case that ends up, and we'll see if it does. It might not. As I mentioned before, we were recording, but just asking around, like, there was a wide range of opinions on if Thad Ward goes. There were some, as I think someone mentioned to me, like he could be the first pick. He could not get selected at all. It's all going to come down to what teams think of his medicals, and which makes sense to me. But on Hamilton, it was surprising, and it's just I don't know. I don't believe in the bat enough for him to develop into anything more than like the 26th guy on your roster who is a pinch runner and maybe plays some defense, even though I don't think he's that good a defender. And if he's that's probably a useful major leaguer in Ward's being protected. But I just don't think there's enough. I'm not sure there's enough bat to even like get to the big leagues, frankly. But I mean, we'll see. Like if you look at his season splits, he had a really good end last like mid-August to the end of the season. He hit well. It was like, 300, 400, 500. But you had a 90 game sample before that where he was hitting close to 200 with a 300 OBP and a 300 slug. And so it's like, what do you trust more? And it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. Looking forward to seeing him again to see what's going on there. Cause I wasn't a huge fan when I saw him this year. And I just think it's definitely caught me off guard that he was like, if they protected 6 guys, including Ward and Hamilton was in there, it would have been like, yeah, okay, sure. Like they protected the 4 that makes sense.
It's a little weird, but yeah.
But just, I don't know, protecting him and Abreu over Ward is just a little strange to me.
Yeah, I honestly, at this point, I think I would be more surprised if Ward is not picked in Rule 5 than if he is.
I wouldn't be
Not
surprised at all if like the Yankees just as like
well,
you did it to us, we're going to do it to you.
right. Well, and it's funny because I'm not saying he's going to stick. I could see him get like, I mean, I get like kind of maybe Justin Haley-ish vibes there, where like maybe he gets picked and like sticks through camp and he comes back in May or something. Who knows, right? But like, it's interesting because, like you said, the stuff was down in Arizona. He wasn't throwing the cutter, right?
No, it was like fastball slider. That's basically it.
Yeah, which is interesting. He had the injury down there. I don't know. I mean, look, I just pulled up the Boston Globe article by Pete Abraham when the Red Sox picked Whitlock, right? And I'm looking at what they say about him. Hasn't appeared in a game since July 3, 2019, had Tommy John surgery, is expected to be ready for spring training. All things are trending upwards. He's on a normal progression leading into this upcoming season, quoted from Gus Quattlebaum. We're really excited to land someone that we think has upside as a potential starter, or at a minimum can assume some volume in a role either out of the pen or as a starter. Says they looked at medical records, scouting reports, and analytic data. Instagram helped too because he had posted 3 videos of his post-surgery workouts. And in the last one, he was throwing 94. What else do they say about him? Yeah, okay. He was 3-3 with a 3.07 ERA and 14 starts in Double-A before his injury. He averaged a modest 7.3 strikeouts per 9, but had a high ground ball to fly ball rate, 2.4. He could ultimately profile as a long reliever / swingman type. He keeps the ball on the ground, Quattlebaum said, so the way we defend, the way we shift, I think that can play well into our hands. Like, this was not, we've drafted a potential anchor of our bullpen / future, a guy we're going to give a, what the 5-6 year extension to. Like, I'm reading this and it doesn't sound that much different than how we think of Ward right now. It's just, it's an interesting comparison to make. And I wonder, I don't know, who knows? Maybe we get past the Rule 5 draft and Ward doesn't get picked and it's a gamble that pays off. But yeah, just very interesting. And then with Hamilton, it's the speed.
Yep.
Like you said. So
it's speed. You can play second base. You can kind of play a little shortstop. They tried him in center field last year. I think you have to expose him to the outfield too. Now that he's on the 40 man, he's got to give you good position versatility because it's not an everyday profile with his bat.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I think that I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Chaim Bloom or Brian O'Halloran at the end of the season talked about how they needed to get more athletic. And I give him credit. I'll give them credit for that. Like adding Hamilton is following that. Like he is
true.
He is one of the most athletic guys in the system. I'm trying to think if he probably is the fastest guy in the system now. I'm trying to think.
Oh, he's potentially the best base stealer in the minor leagues right now.
So like that fits
arguably
with, if you're trying to make your team athletic, keeping him makes a lot of sense. So
sure. I just wonder what chances there were that a team was going to take him in the Rule 5 draft and keep him on the major league roster for an entire season.
Yeah,
that's
I don't know.
The thing.
But maybe, but the thing is, and this is, I think, the part that's hard is that we don't know the impact of the new rules. And I think they're hedging on that basically is like, we'd rather have him protected. And if it's not a big deal, we can just always remove him versus risk losing him. And then it comes out that like, oh wait, you need like a super fast base runner because stealing bases is super easy now with the new rules about like pickoffs and next bigger bases. And if that's the case, they don't have anyone else in the organization who kind of fits that profile. Like
if you can
Jarren Duran has speed, but his instincts are not that good.
No, and you can see that in his high minor stolen base totals.
Yeah, and he also doesn't play infield, which Hamilton does. Like, so I can see that case that he's a unique player in the sense that if you're trying to fill a bunch of different archetypes in your organization, he checks boxes that a lot of other players don't. And I think that is, the more I've thought about it, I think that is the case for it, is that it's a unique profile that they just don't have and is hard to replicate. I mean, the fact that like this season, Terrence Gore is still getting run out in October and like September and October by contending teams shows the value of speed. And like, if they think they have an internal guy that, who has more upside at the plate and can play infield and outfield as well, like if they can turn him into a good defender at second base, passable at shortstop, good in the outfield, like I get it. Like that makes a lot of sense and could be a really, especially now that you have to carry 13 position players, like there is room for a player like him without impacting even if he gets 20 at bats the entire season, there is room to carry a player like him now on the major league roster.
Well, it's like, do you now with the new rules, right? if a walk in the 8th inning has like a 95% chance of turning into a double with a stolen base. And who knows, maybe it becomes easier to steal third now. Because the break even point for stolen bases is something like 70. It's a little north of 75%, I think. I remember reading of like what makes it worth attempting to steal a base is you need like a 75, or it's a little higher than 75% chance of it being a successful stolen base. If you, under the new rules, are going to have like a 95% chance of stealing that base, yeah, maybe you do need to keep him on the roster for that, right? Like maybe if stealing third turns into like an 80% success proposition, having a guy that can turn an 8th or 9th inning walk or single into a triple that now all you need is a sac fly, that could be super valuable. But we just got to wait and see what the numbers say. But yeah, it's intriguing. It's certainly intriguing. Anyone else that you think has a shot? I mean, we've mentioned Politi, we've mentioned Wickelman Gonzalez, we've mentioned Ward. Anyone else you think that they're in danger of losing? I know you mentioned Jacob Wallace as a guy that you could see a team maybe liking the pitch data.
Yeah,
I
think, I mean, I want more in detail in the article on the news page. So if you're interested in kind of a more detailed breakdown, check that out. But
news.soxprospects.com.
Yeah, well, I think we should discuss Gonzalez also, why he wasn't protected, because I think him and Paulinho and Brainer Bonacier are the 3 highest ranked guys who aren't protected. All of them are inside our top 20, and I think will be at the end of the season. And I think it just comes down to, with all of them, that they were too far away, and they're just making the determination that they don't think that a team would take them and let them stick. With Paulinho and Bonacier, I think that's makes a lot of sense. Like those guys were bats in low A. That's just not the type of profile that gets selected. It very rarely happens, and if it does, it's usually catchers. So
yeah, I mean, keeping that guy on the 26 man all year, just that's hard.
No, but Gonzalez, I get why they didn't, and I projected they would protect him. I thought that he made sense too, because you had room on your 40 man to carry one kind of like developmental guy like they have with Jake Room the last couple of years, and or Yohan Ibar in the past. Like they've done this with guys. Williams Harris, yeah. But I don't know. I don't think I don't know if he'll get selected or not. It's hard to say, because all it takes is one team that isn't competing that thinks they can hide him for a year. I mean, it's been done before. Like we talked about last episode. I think Jason Garcia, like Elvis Luciano, like there's several others that I can't think of right now where pitchers, aka who were relievers, get taken from the low minors, because they turn them into relievers, obviously, because you're not going to take that guy up and start him in the majors.
Yeah.
And I personally think his stuff is good enough and he has enough upside that I would have, bit the bullet and protected him. I get not doing it with all the guys they protected, other than maybe Abreu. I could see them in the major leagues next year, but I don't know. I just think that's a wild card. And I think that if he does get selected and ends up sticking, that's one that I think could come back to bite them more than, say, not protecting someone like Abreu.
Well, let me put it
if that was the debate, was those two for one spot.
Yeah. I mean, let me put it this way. The Baltimore Orioles this past year, pretty good team, finished higher than the Red Sox in the standings, right? Is Wickelman Gonzalez worse than guys that they trotted out at points during the season? Like Denny, look at just the former Red Sox who the Orioles trotted out there this year. Denny Reyes, Travis Lakins.
Well, and I think the thing is, there's enough teams like the Pirates, like
that's what I'm saying. That's a decent team that did that. Like
there's enough teams that aren't competing that can probably do that. So
yeah,
I don't know. It's definitely a gamble, and I would not be surprised at all if he gets selected. I think if you had to tell me one Red Sox was going to be selected, it would be Politi. Well, Ward, obviously. Ward would be first now.
Yes, Ward is
outside
one. Politi
of Ward,
is two.
It'd be like Politi or like maybe Ryan Fernandez, but I think the medical stuff is going to scare teams off him, because he pitched once after July 30th.
Yep.
His stuff was really good. Like his velo popped up basically 2 full grades. He went from had a plus cutter all of a sudden in like the low 90s. That was just nasty. And if he had stayed healthy, I think he might have had to be protected. But since he didn't end the season healthy, and it's an arm injury, I don't think that a team would take a risk him not knowing his medicals. You said Wallace. Wallace has really good stuff. Get up to 100 double plus breaker, but awful delivery, a ton of effort, and just no consistency at all. He'll have months where he strikes out everyone and doesn't walk anyone and doesn't give up any hits. He'll have months where he doesn't give up any hits, but he walks everyone and strikes out everyone. He'll have months where he doesn't strike out anyone and walks everyone and gives up a ton of hits. Like, you just never know what you're going to get. So I think that's why he wasn't protected. And then Ryan Zefferjon was the other pitcher I mentioned. Just, he was someone who I should have looked. I don't remember how he did in the AFL, but he ended the season really strong after moving to the bullpen.
The problem with the AFL is it's such a small sample size as a reliever. If you have one bad game, your numbers don't look good.
But yeah,
so I think that happened with him where he had like one or two early games where he gave up runs, and so his numbers
like 4 runs
like
and they were just toast. Yeah,
because he got better as it went on.
He ended the season strong though, and showed some like good stuff. And then position player wise, Christian Koss wasn't protected. I know there were some people who thought he would. I didn't see it because and especially if you're protecting Hamilton, there's no way you're protecting both. Koss doesn't have the speed, whereas he doesn't have a single tool. I would say is even like maybe his defense is the only thing above is that average at least.
Interesting, by the way, that he's playing a lot of left field in Puerto Rico right now.
Yeah, that is interesting. Actually, but
he's splitting his time between short and third and left.
He's a fine player, but I don't think that he's someone, if he gets popped, you're not going to miss him.
No.
And I think Steven Scott's the same way. He's okay. He's catcher. He's trying to play catcher. It's not great.
Ryan Fitzgerald,
but he can hit a little bit, like position versatility. Yeah. He's good in the AFL, but he's another one that if he gets taken, like, it is what it is. So yeah, I mean, overall it's a little surprising, but we'll see what happens both over the next few days, if there's any trades to be made, and then what happens obviously with the Rule 5 draft to see if any of these guys actually get taken.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. 40-man is now full, as you mentioned, Ian. This coming Friday is the non-tender deadline. Anyone you think gets non-tendered? Like, I don't know that, like, I see a lot of guys on the 40-man roster. Like, I think we came up with a pretty easy list of 5 before the show, or 4 at least, probably, of guys who.
Well, they're going to have to make moves because, I mean, if they're not going to run with the current 40-man roster.
You figure they're adding. I mean, they literally don't have a major league shortstop, right fielder, one starting pitcher. Need at least a couple of. Yeah, I mean, they've got moves they need to make.
So for non-tenders, I guess the ones would be Yu Chang is one.
Does he get non-tendered, or do they just wait and try and get him to? I mean, I guess he's out of options.
He's out of options. So he's out of options.
Do you try and DFA him and clear him? I think, because the thing is, when you non-tender a guy, he instantly becomes a free agent.
I would probably do that with him. Maybe they try to bring him back like they did Franchi last year on that poison pill minor league deal.
Yep.
Franchi's another one.
Franchi, I could see getting non-tendered at this point.
Yeah. Franchi, the two big ones to me are Josh Taylor and Ryan Brazier.
Yeah, because those are the guys that you would non-tender rather than DFA.
Yeah, Brazier's going to his last year arbitration, so he's going to get a raise on whatever he made last year. So I think he'll be making like close to $2 million or something. I'm just not sure he's worth that much money, especially as like a 35-year-old reliever. And that shocked me, by the way, that he's 35 years old. Like, it's kind of crazy. He's in his final year arbitration. He's 35. I guess what's happening. You don't make it to the majors till you're like 30, or 29. But the other one is Josh Taylor, who he hasn't been healthy, and the stuff has not been back since he had that back injury. So yeah, I mean, I think that several of those guys, though, at least are going to get are going to get outrighted or get non-tendered, whatever, to get off the 40-man, especially as they sign free agents. And I think also that they're going to have to do some cleanup with some of the other like prospects on the 40-man, because I just think they have too many guys who don't project who like are kind of caught in no man's land. Like, they're not necessarily good enough to play for the Red Sox, but they still have value and could be like a useful major league player. Yep. And I think that they need to kind of like make some moves to open things up to get some more flexibility.
Yeah, I have the MLB trade rumors projections here. So they've got Brazier projected at 2.3.
Yeah, no thanks. I mean,
I'm out on that. Franchi getting 1.5. I'm good on that.
Yeah.
They projected, it's for what it's worth, since our last episode, Rob Refsnyder signed a 1-year, $1.2 million deal.
Fine with
it. MLB trade rumors had him projected at 1.6. And I'm cool with that as a bench bat. I like him.
Yeah, Refsnyder's a good like platoon bat. Hits lefties well, professional at bats, work counts, like good defender. I'm perfectly fine with bringing him back in one of those bench spots.
Josh Taylor at 1.1 million.
I could see.
I don't hate it.
It's probably about.
Um,
I bet he would get in free agency like
Yeah.
$1 million. About
Yeah. And then Yu Chang at 900K. I mean, that's just
same
like,
thing. Like
if you keep him around, great. If you don't, like, I also just don't understand how he fits on the major league roster if Christian Arroyo and
well, I
Rod
think
Refsnyder are on it
that's the
and Bobby
bigger question
Dahlbeck.
is
Yeah.
how he doesn't make any sense on the MLB roster
No.
because of they already have 3 right potential bench players. So unless you're
Right.
trading someone like Dahlbeck, like it just he doesn't fit at all. But
Right.
yeah.
Right. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens there. Other transactions since our last episode, Ian, we met, I don't even think I mentioned the club designated Jake Reed and Caleb Hamilton for assignment today to make room on the 40-man roster. And they also traded Easton McGee on the 9th. So last Wednesday, those 3 were all, I think, guys we knew when they claimed them on waivers. It was just to see if they could be the ones to pass them through. McGee got traded for cash considerations. No mention of a player to be named. That's just straight cash, homie. So he's gone. Reed and Hamilton. I mean, you see if they clear. If they don't clear, oh well, you tried. And if they do clear, then maybe you have an interesting, useful minor league piece. Other minor league moves, or I guess major league moves, the Red Sox extended qualifying offers to Nathan Eovaldi and Xander Bogaerts, who both rejected them. Declined to issue qualifying offers to JD Martinez and Michael Wacha. As we've discussed on here, Ian, the only questions were on Eovaldi and Wacha. I get what they wound up going with. And Eovaldi, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that if they offered it to either Martinez or Wacha, I think they were accepting it 100%. So
you think Wacha definitely? Yeah, I mean, we'll see.
I think he does because Perez took it, and I think Perez is a fair comp for kind of the level he is.
That's fair.
I think Tyler Anderson's a little bit better than him, and which is why he rejected. And obviously, he was already signed. So I would not have offered Wacha one.
What did Anderson get? 339.
339. And that's like, I think for me the most interesting how that relates to like what Eovaldi wants. Because if you told me you could get him for 340, I would do that.
Yeah.
But if he's wanting closer to 350, 360, then it gets a little like
Yeah, I mean, Eovaldi and the club are apparently negotiating a multi-year deal, or not negotiating a multi-year deal. They're still negotiating.
They're discussing
a multi-year deal. I could see him coming back on a 2 or 3 year deal.
I mean, this is your last could be, but also I think that if it's true, which I don't remember where I saw it, but someone mentioned that if Eovaldi came back, that would pretty much be the end of them searching for starters, unless it was like an opportunistic deal. I could see that, trying to get let Eovaldi walk and signing a younger person like Senga from Japan or
and getting the pick.
He's Japan, right?
Senga's Japan, yeah.
Yeah. Signing someone like Senga and getting, as you said, getting the pick, I think is a worthwhile trade-off, especially since there could be a chance, they sign a QO free agent and lose a pick. Or it would actually be losing 2 picks, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point, that in letting Eovaldi walk and signing someone, even if you think it's like a wash.
Yeah, just a comparable player.
If it's a comparable player for comparable money, give me the comparable player for comparable money with the pick.
That's the thing that teams might be looking to do, like the Dodgers, for example. I would not be surprised at all if their plan is to let Trey Turner walk and sign Correa or Bogarts or someone to play shortstop because they'll let a pick out of it.
Yep.
Like something like that.
Although they also
they wouldn't sign Bogarts. It would only work with Correa because
they only work with Correa because they went over like the Red Sox did. So they would lose their 2nd and their 5th and only get a 4th.
Yeah.
So, which is partially, that's why that rule works the way it does. Other stuff that's happened, minor league free agency. You can look at the list of minor league free agents on our website. They're on the depth chart page. There's a page that's just minor league free agent eligibility. The Red Sox re-signed a couple of potential minor league free agents. In addition to adding Emmanuel Valdez to the 40-man roster, they re-signed left-hander Odanier Mosqueda and right-hander Michael Geddes, 2 minor league deals. Not terribly surprised. Those were 2 that kind of stood out to me as guys they might bring back. Geddes is a guy who just converted to relieving and got the AA just converted to pitching and got the AA as a reliever. And Mosqueda, a useful lefty who's been around the system for a while. I could see him starting in AAA and, being kind of the depth lefty there. And maybe he turns into something, maybe he doesn't. Guys,
they just don't have a lot of lefty relievers.
They really don't.
Our projections, the only ones in Worcester right now are him and Darwinzon Hernandez, who I don't think is even a lock to be on the roster next year.
Right.
And then in Double A, you go down to Brendan Neal and Brendan Salucci, and then you go to Greenville. There's not a single lefty projected, and you go to Salem. There's not a single lefty projected.
Well,
In the
that's
bullpen.
last year when they had no one in Salem or the
Well,
Florida
no.
Complex League.
This is for next year though.
No, that's what I'm saying is that there was no one in
Oh,
Salem or the Florida Complex League. So it
Yeah,
makes
so
sense
it's just
that's
like
what's
there's just
matriculating
not a
out.
lot of lefties in the system, so I get bringing back Mosqueda.
Yep, 100%. There are guys that are free agents that I could see coming back. Brian Keller is a useful AAA pitcher. Could see like a Pedro Castellanos coming back, depending on what they have available in terms of at bats in AAA. Christian Stewart, another guy who had a pretty good year. So we'll see what winds up happening with those guys. Speaking of Major League starting pitching, I guess we need to mention that James Paxton exercised his 1 year, $4 million player option for next year. So he'll be back. I'm cool with it, man.
Yeah,
$4 million.
If he
that's
doesn't
half
even,
of what they paid Jake Diekman this year.
If he doesn't pitch this year, that's still a good deal.
It's fine.
It seemed like Scott Boras was kind of surprised that he accepted it.
Oh, really?
Saw those quotes.
I didn't catch that. No.
But yeah, no, I'm perfectly content bringing him back at $4 million. If he's healthy, great. If he's not, there's very little risk at that number. And if you told me you get 2 years to like try and figure out if Paxton's healthy or not for 14 million or no, sorry, for 10 million, right?
Say this again.
It's turned into a 2 year, $10 million deal, basically.
I think he got 8 last year. Yes.
I thought he got 6 last year.
6 and 4 is 10. My maths are good. Yes.
That's like fine. Like the Dodgers paid Danny Duffy like 3 million, 4 million to rehab last year. He never pitched. Like if you're telling me it cost, and I think Paxton was obviously better than Duffy. So if you're telling me, 2 years, 10 million, you get a chance at him rehabbing for 2 years to come back healthy, I think that's perfectly reasonable.
And maybe he likes it here and you re-sign him next year and he pitches
exactly.
well.
So yeah,
so I'm clearly he's comfortable. That's why he stayed.
I wouldn't project him to be in the starting rotation to open the season, but if he's like the guy, who starts the season rehabbing and then is back, or even, I would love for him to start if he proves he's healthy enough to start in the rotation. That'd be great. Sure. But I wouldn't project that right now. I just hope that doesn't dissuade them from going out and getting a higher end starter on the free agent market. Because
you figure the rotation you have penciled in right now is Sale, Pivetta, Whitlock, Bayo, acquisition. And then after that, you've got like Paxton. Who am I forgetting? Anyone?
No, like Cutter Crawford.
Then you get the Crawford, Winkowski, Siebold group. Which
my thing is too. If you prove you have 6, they're all healthy at the start of the season. I have no issue also going with a 6-man rotation. Yep. Kind of like what the Angels did last year. Like I think they have guys who could use either the extra rest or having their innings limited, and Bayo and Whitlock
and Sale.
And Sale too, but I was just going to say also just like they have injury risk, so keeping them healthy could be a good way to do that too. So.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Other stuff since the last episode, I think that's about it. DSL pitcher Starlin Santos was suspended for 60 games, and then today was part of a group that was released from the DSL rosters. No one terribly surprising on that list. So that's about all that has happened transaction and news wise since the last episode, I believe, Ian. So
yeah, with the Red Sox, there were the couple other major league signings which we kind of talked about briefly earlier. Rizzo back to the Yankees. And
we should mention the relievers because you mentioned last episode that Rafael Montero and Robert Suarez were your 2 targets.
Yeah,
and they were after Diaz, the next 2 guys to sign. Suarez got 5 years.
Crazy.
Padres.
5 years, 46 million for a 32-year-old who has like 50 career innings in the majors.
Get that money, son.
That was good for him. That's a great contract for him, but I would not have been interested in that.
No.
The other one I would have
done.
Montero got 3 for 34.
You would have done that, yeah.
Yeah, my context with that is I think he could be a closer. I think he could be a legit closer. He showed it with Houston last year. He was very good when he was filling in for Presley. I think he had like 14, 15 saves last year. Mm-hmm. Showed in the playoffs he can handle playoffs and high leverage innings. And I think that that's a fair number when you look at like the context of last season. Kendall Graveman got like 3 years, 25 million from the White Sox to be their setup guy. And Liam Hendricks got 3 years, 54 million to be the closer. 334 is on the lower end of that range. I think that would be the range you're looking at. I think I would have done that.
Yep. Oh, I guess Urena from the Rockies also signed the reliever. He re-signed a 1 year. A great tweet from Cespedes Family Barbecue is there was a graphic on MLB Network of like 4 relievers re-sign with their clubs, and it was like Diaz, Montero, Suarez, and Urena, and they were like, congratulations to Jose Urena for making this graphic because he just did not belong there. But anyway, not a whole lot else has happened. Like you said, Rizzo re-signed with the Yankees on a 2-year deal, 2-year, 234, I think, or something like that.
240, I think, but it's like an
240.
opt-out. I don't know. There's weird stuff in it.
And then, Tyler Anderson is the other big one. So we'll hopefully start seeing some movement here. But at any rate, I think that's about it. So shall we move on to emails if there's nothing else, Mr. Ian? Oh, I don't want to look at my news alerts. Next up, let's see, podcast emails. Yay. All right. So again, podcast at soxprospects.com, because we want to talk about what you want to hear about. So here are your questions. Our first, Ian, comes from Will, who says, when Chaim Bloom was hired in 2019, there was a lot of talk about him attracting talent from the Rays front office over to the Red Sox, at least once the embargo period on that was over. James Click was probably number 1 on that list, but the Astros hired him to run their team in January 2020. Now that he's out of Houston, is there any place in the Red Sox front office for James Click or someone like him that wouldn't be a demotion? Would going from being the top dog as, quote, general manager, end quote, to, quote, deputy chief baseball officer, end quote, be a lateral move? How important are the specific titles versus their actual function? Fair question, Will, and I think an interesting one, given Click's background with the Rays. Bloom never did really bring anyone over from
he brought a couple lower level guys, but none of the bigger names came over.
Yeah. And so it's an interesting thought. I think what you would have with Click is, if there isn't anything out there for him right now to run a team, which, like, there's only 30 of those jobs.
Yeah, and right now it's just hard to, like, most teams already have turned over their GM position if they're bringing in someone new.
Yeah,
like the Royals did, and a few others.
So there's that job's not out there. If he wants to work this year, you bring him in for a year as like a advisor or something.
It's like what Dombrowski did with like Frank Wren, or like back in the day, like guys like that.
You just bring him in. I mean, there's always room,
and that would be, because I think it would be hard to fit him into like a normal title, because you already have you already have Chaim Bloom and Brian O'Halloran, and
because O'Halloran's the GM. Yep.
Yeah, and I just don't think there's a spot to fit.
And you've got 3 senior VPs on the baseball side.
I don't think there's room to fit him into like a title like that. I think, as you said, the way it would do it would be just like a special advisor to the GM who, does a bunch of different jobs and just kind of like, that gets a year in here, and then next season probably gets one of the big GM jobs, because he probably should be a GM for someone.
Yeah. So that I think that, but there's always room for more, more voices in the room. I think that they would certainly love to have him on staff. It's just a matter of, like, if that's what he wants to do. Our next email comes from Sean, Ian, and Sean says, hey guys, I'll keep it short and sweet. 2 questions kind of related. 1, what free agents do you think are good bets to see improvements at the plate with the banning of the shift that would fit the Red Sox? And then 2, there were rumors of the Red Sox asking about the availability of other teams' second basemen. It's being reported that Trevor Story would move to short and they would trade for a second baseman. I don't think it's likely, but what if they were gauging the market to see what Trevor Story would be worth? Does he have more trade value because of his defense at second with the banning of the shift? Thanks, Sean. Taking the last one first, trading Trevor Story does not make a lot of sense to me, because now you are creating another hole that you need to fill. So I don't see that happening. That's not a move you make when you're a team trying to contend. As far as free agents that are good bets, I mean, Rizzo might have been one, honestly, before he re-signed with the Yankees. I don't know. I mean, it would be left-handed hitters who get shifted.
It would be left-handed pull hitters. But I haven't done like, I haven't really
deep dive yet.
No. I'm just trying to like bring up like hit data for some guys to see what it looks like. But
I mean, maybe ask us later in the offseason about guys that are rumored to the Red Sox, and we'll look at it. Because the thing is, it's just the universe of potential free agents is just.
No one's signed yet.
So we'll get there. We'll get there. Our next email is from Eric, Ian, and Eric says, I would be curious to hear your perspective on the potential targets of the Red Sox coming over from Japan. This offseason, it seems like the big names are Kodai Senga and Masataka Yoshida. But are there any other players on your radar, either for this year or the future, that could be a fit? It also sounds like Roki Sasaki, Munetaka Murakami, and Jung Ho Lee are other players that may make the jump in the next few years if there are others worth tracking for the near future. Also, what is the right way to think about the talent level in NPB and the KBO? Is obviously a step down from MLB, but is it above AAA? Thanks, Eric. I mean, on the latter point, I think it depends on the player because we've seen players come over from Korea and Japan immediately make an impact, and we've seen some come over and just do nothing. So I think it just really depends on the player and the type. It's not as easy as like the statistics from MPB translate this way. I think Senga is an obvious potential fit as a starting pitcher who apparently is interested in a team that is, I forget if he isn't necessarily interested in just staying on the West Coast. I think I saw, and he's interested in signing with a team.
No, I think it said a big city who's a contender.
Big city who's a contender. That's what it was. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Boston fits that. So I think they should absolutely be in doing their homework on him, and they are. We'll see what it takes to
That's
sign
been
him.
reported, and I think the big thing too is that he doesn't cost a draft pick, and so that would interest
Exactly.
me greatly.
And Yoshida's the outfielder, right?
Yeah.
I looked at it a little bit. He doesn't super excite me.
He's tiny. It's part of it. He's like listed at 5'8", 176.
And it's also just not a good outfield market, like we talked about last episode.
It's not at all.
So you got to kick the tires. But that said, like, is he going to go the way of like Yoshi Tsutsugo?
Or like Shingo, or no, I think a better comp would be like someone like Shingo Akiyama.
Akiyama was the other guy.
He was obviously really good. Comes over
Japan.
and he's just not strong enough, and the contact skills aren't like high enough to carry him.
Enough. Yep. Yeah. Those are that's the guy I was thinking of. I just couldn't remember like.
But yeah, I mean,
a vague recollection.
If your scouts think he's good enough, like I think that's definitely you take a look. And I think the other area I would watch is just keep an eye on like guys coming back. Like last year, Nick Martinez, Robert Suarez, like they turned into legit MLB bullpen arms, and they were coming back. They were kind of guys who reached their peak in the majors, went over to Japan or Korea for a few years, pitched really well there, and then came back and were much better stuff wise. I think there's a few guys coming back, a few Americans or guys who started their careers over in the US at stateside and then went over there who are coming back who could be of interest, as kind of like the relief types like them.
You know who's pitching in, I think, the Dominican this offseason is Carter Stewart.
Yeah, he's still got a couple years though. He's the 8th overall pick by the Braves because he signed a 5-year deal with them.
5-year deal.
Yeah.
But it was just interesting. I saw that name. I was like, oh yeah, him. Anyway, but yeah. But as far as the guys that might come over in the future, I mean, who knows? Like you don't plan on it because you don't know when guys are going to come over. You don't know what guys are going to do. Like you have your scouts over there watching them and they do that. But beyond that, you don't plan on it.
I think that that Fangraphs actually has they have a decent little list where they list all the international guys and they are giving grades on guys who are in Japan but aren't over here. Right. And so for them, like Senga is the 4th ranked free agent, international free agent. Ahead of him are Yoshinobu, Yamamoto, Sasaki, and then Jung-Hoo Lee.
And those aren't free agents this year. Those are just
no. And that's
guys
the thing though is
there.
they predict Sasaki won't come over until 2026 or like Yamamoto till 2024. So yeah, it's I think that's the good list to check out because as you said, we don't really know any more than what's publicly available places.
Yeah,
like that.
I'm not watching MPB on my nights off. Our next email is from John, who says, "Hi, Chris and Ian. It seems that this is a weak year for free agents, at least in terms of depth. If you listen to our last episode, we agree. Yet this is the year that the Red Sox have lots of dollars to deploy due, perhaps in part, to a concentration of expiring contracts / free agents. To what degree does the front office think about / plan for what I'll call, quote, vintage year and quote, diversification? In other words, shouldn't the Red Sox not have found themselves to be so dependent on available spending in any one particular year? Instead, shouldn't they have tried to plan ahead by spreading their fixed payroll across years? That way, they might not have found themselves with concentrated spending in any one potentially weak year, such as they seem to have found themselves in now. Thanks, John. It's an interesting question, Ian. I don't think. I mean, look, Bogarts had an opt-out, granted one that he was probably going to use. Well, I just think it's
not the same front office.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
It's hard to plan for that.
I don't know if he's necessarily saying it's Bloom. I think he's just saying
no, but I just think but it's hard to plan this out when there's turnover at the top. You have different priorities, it's not like they planned for all these contracts to end at the same time. That's just
I
how it
mean,
worked out. Like, it's just
like,
one of those things.
look, everybody thought Carlos Correa was signing his mega deal last year, not this year, right?
Yeah,
Like, no
like
one thought he was going
it's
to wind
just
up with the deal he got
the
from
Dodgers are in the
Minnesota.
same situation, and no one is like asking if it's a problem. Like,
Yeah, and I mean, look, like
yeah.
there's always turnover, right, on the 40-man roster. Because if you, I mean, so looking at the 40-man right now, yes, they have a lot of money to spend this offseason, but like next year, Matt Barnes comes off the books, probably because they're not going to pick up his $8 million option. I'm sure they potentially have Devers next year. Brazier, whatever. Kike Hernandez is off the books again next year. Paxton has 1 year. You know, they've got like, it's not as big of a year, but you always just get like, you know, it's turnover, you know, for all like, you know, no, like, yeah, you can plan for diversity, but like then in 2 years, you've got like Verdugo coming off the books, Pivetta, Christian Arroyo. Like you're always going to have guys coming off the books in waves, but like, you know, when they signed Dustin Pedroia to his contract, they probably thought he was going to be there till the end of it. And he wound up not finishing the contract because he got hurt. You know, I think that that's just a little bit, you know, too much. You know, Chris Sale had an opt out for this year that they maybe thought he might use, maybe thought he wouldn't use. I don't know. I don't know what their plan was for that, but there's just a lot of variables. And I think the thing is with each individual, I think you have to look at it as each individual player. It's a value proposition for that contract. You know, JD Martinez wanted a contract of the length he got. So you sign him to it because you thought it was a good deal to sign the guy to. I get what you're saying about the vintage year diversification, but you know, look, I think I don't know that they signed the last one of whatever Bogarts, Martinez, Eovaldi, Waka Hill, like put it this way. Chaim Bloom didn't sign Rich Hill and Michael Waka to 1 year deals thinking like, I want to have all my money off the books next year. He signed the 1 year deals because he wanted to sign those guys to 1 year deals, you know? So that I think that's really what it is. It's just, look, you know, the David Price contract came off the books this year, but it's not like they were, you know, planning on paying half of his contract for 3 seasons while he pitched for another team. Right. So there's a lot of moving parts, put it that way. So it's kind of I don't know. I think that's kind of getting to it. You're over planning to some degree at that point. Yes. Would you like to, in an ideal world, diversify a bit? Sure. But I don't know that getting into that kind of minutia and planning, it's going to go sideways on you. So, you know, one way or another. So I think it just pays to be flexible and keep an eye both on the near term and long term. Anything else to add to that, Ian, or should we go to the next one? All right. Next email is from Nick G, who says, my name is Nick and I'm a new listener. Welcome, Nick. His question, Ian, do you want to guess what his question is? You don't want to guess? You could probably figure it out in 3 guesses.
No, I'm good.
All right. He wants to know if there's any new info on Noah's song.
You can take this one.
What are the chances?
I've been asked the question like 4 times.
Well, and that's why I'm answering the email, because this is not the only person asking this. What are the chances we can see him pitching for the organization in 2023, and what role could we see him in after a 3-year hiatus? Really enjoy the podcast and look forward to what you have to say. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the email, Nick. Sorry, we're not trying to be mean with the joking. It's just, what is the latest on Noah's song is a question we have been asked nonstop for 3 years now. I mean, I guess no one was asking in 2020 because no one was playing, but yeah, there's no news. If there were news, we would report it. He applied for a waiver in the middle of the summer, I think it was, Ian. Yeah, we don't know anything other than that. He's waiting for a response on his waiver. We haven't heard anything. I'm sure the Red Sox don't know. So at this point, I think it's who knows, and that's why we don't rank him anymore, because who knows if he's coming back and who knows what he's going to be when he comes back. So he could come back and be throwing in the low 80s and never pitch another game. He could come back and be what he was when he left and tear through the minors and be in the major leagues as a reliever in a year and a half. I don't know. Who knows? I think it's just it's we don't know. Nobody knows. We'll see. And I think that is it. So thank you all again for your emails. It's podcast@soxprospects.com. Thank you all very much for writing in, and please write in for our next episode. We'll be recording again probably in a week. So hit us up with your emails there. With that, Ian, I think it's time to wrap it up. Thank you all for listening. Make sure you're keeping an eye on the news page where you've got the weekly fall winter recaps. We've got Ian just put up a scouting scratch on the Rule 5 guys today, so check that out, news.soxprospects.com. Hit us up on Twitter. You can follow the website at Sox Prospects on both Twitter and Instagram. You can follow us, assuming Twitter doesn't go under. You can follow Ian at Ian Cundall. That's IANCUNDALL. You can follow me at SP Chris Hatfield. Again, I mentioned the email, and you can support us on patreon.com/Sox Prospects, like our $5 level supporters. That'd be Deb Kendall, Andrew Wallen, Lendl Martin, Ernest Shermer, Kyle C., Tyler Woodrow, Pat in New Hampshire, Jeff Trainer, David R. Nardone, Tim Harding, Bill Stanton, Evan Kirkwood, Chris Fox, James O'Hara, Nathan Kennan, Ben and R.I., David B., Ben Burnett, Al Mendel, Kevin Katrides, Steve Gregory, James Bailey, Andreas Goldstrand, Corey Perrick, Forrest Perkins, Mark Herman, Brian Cowan, Andrew K., Jeff Harwood, Dusty G., Michael Murphy, Bob Introne, Pavel, Jordan Shabbat, Jeffrey Scruggs, Nicholas Staropoli, Mike Kawano, Chris Bollier, Curtis Waltman, Michael Stewart, Caleb Farron, John Kane, Jason Stone, Burner, Jason Parker, Mike Granger, Mike Mignosa, Jeff Richardson, Michael Cullen, John McGee, Nicholas Lenson, Paul Manish, James P. McMahon, Jim Tuttle, Adam Gregory, Brian Rose, Jake O'Donnell, John Mulqueen, Gerardo Iantosca, Sean Guinan, and Kyle Sanborn, who recently signed backup, I believe, but I believe he's been a patron in the past, but new on the $5 level list, at least as of a week ago. So thank you all for your support. Thank you all for listening. We will be back in your eardrum soon, so keep an ear open for the podcast. We'll be back at you.